At the Unity Festival in Switzerland, seekers and visionaries gather to explore the deeper layers of existence, and few have gone deeper than Thomas Campbell. As a physicist and author of the book My Big Toe, he bridges science and spirituality, revealing that consciousness is at the core of reality itself. His talk truly expands how we see the world, the mainstream, and ourselves. Let's have a look.
Guten Morgen. That's my total vocabulary in German, so from now on it'll be English. What I'd like to do today is give you an idea of the big picture. What's going on kind of at the bottom level. Rather than talk about relationship or the theory, I'm going to hopefully let you understand better what the big underlying wave is. Before I start that, many of you probably aren't familiar with me, so I'll give you just a very short introduction. I'm a physicist, and I got out of graduate school, took my first job, and within 3 months, I met Bob Monroe. Hopefully you know who Bob Monroe is. Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, and Ultimate Journey. If you've read those books, you'll notice that in Far Journeys there's this TC physicist. That would be me. While I was working with Bob, I put many hours in over 8 years. I learned many things, but the most important were that I learned to do all the things that were paranormal, because for me that was going to be proof that this was real. I'm a physicist, I need a lot of proof that this is going to be real. So I learned how to go out of body on demand. I learned how to heal with my mind. I learned to remote view, communicate mind to mind. Now, what do you think happens to a physicist who is a master of physics and at the same time a master of the paranormal? Well, what happens is you end up with a physicist who is trying very hard to unify the normal and the paranormal, unify mind and matter, to unify the objective and the subjective realities. Because all of that was my reality, and I knew that there was some overarching understanding, some overarching way of looking at reality that would explain all of it. That's what I've been doing over the last 50 years, 60 years actually. When I was at Bob Monroe's, I was in my middle 20s, and I've been on this path ever since. So the first thing I want to talk about is the physics end of it, but don't despair. You won't have to know anything about physics. I want to give you the whole picture. If we were to think about who were the greatest physicists, the most brilliant, the most creative, those that made the largest impact over, say, the 20th century and the 21st century, we would think about the group of physicists who brought us quantum physics. We would think about Heisenberg, Bohr, Planck, Schrödinger, Wigner, and even later Einstein joined in that group. And then if we move a little forward in time, we would think of John Archibald Wheeler. Now what these people have in common The quantum physicists that founded quantum physics, and I mean all of them, stated publicly, came to the conclusion that consciousness was at the bottom of reality. Einstein was quoted in a letter to David Bohm saying that I understand that consciousness is the core idea, but I have no idea how to put that in an equation or turn it into a theory. So they knew that consciousness was fundamental. Now John Wheeler, he's famous for the line, it from bit, it being reality, and bit being the smallest piece of information. So he was saying reality is information-based. And today, I'd say it's a very large minority of physicists would agree with John Wheeler. Their physics shows them that our reality is information-based. Mostly it's the physics of atom smashing, called high-energy physics. They have learned that if they make the assumption that a particle is a little piece of mass, say with a charge, like an electron, that they can't get the right answer. They cannot predict what will happen when they slam those atoms together. But if they look at that electron as a point with the attributes of mass and charge, now they get the right answer. Well, a point with the attributes of mass and charge, that's how you describe an electron as information. So these are the brightest and the best. And the finger is strongly pointing toward consciousness and information. So how do we combine both of those ideas, that reality is information-based and reality is consciousness-based? Well, the way to bridge those two is to realize that consciousness is an information system. Consciousness, your consciousness right now, what are you aware of? You're aware of the stage, being here, you see, you have 5 senses. Those senses take in data, that's input. They process that input, they compare it to previous input with memory, they process some more, and then they output what are you going to do with that information. So what else do you know that has input, processes, compares to memory, and that outputs a result? That is the basic definition of an information system. So you see, consciousness can best be modeled or thought of as an information system. So now those two groups, the reality is information-based and reality is based on consciousness, are really the same thing. There's no difference between these. The most famous experiment in physics is probably the double slit experiment. And this experiment came up with 2 amazing facts. One of them is that the experimenter, the humans, have an integral relationship and entanglement with the experiment. They found out that what the experimenters knew more accurately, what information that was available to them, changed results of the experiment. If they had the information of which slit the particle went through, then they got one result, a particle pattern. If they knew which slit changes the way an experiment works. Experiments are just supposed to work however they do. They're supposed to work everywhere, anytime, and not be changed by the available information. That should be irrelevant, wasn't it? The second thing that was very interesting about quantum physics was when they dig down to the bottom of reality, what did they find? Not particles. They found probability. So at the very bottom level, our reality is probability. So if you take these ideas and these statements about reality being information-based and consciousness is at the root, where is that pointing? Where does that take you? It takes you to reality must be computable. If it's based on information, that means it's computable. That means it can be computed. It's a simulation, or it's a virtual reality. That's where that goes. There's no other path for the logic to take. That's the only path. This is a computed reality, and it's computed in consciousness. That's a really big idea. That's kind of a new idea. Lots of people speak of virtual reality, but none of them speak about virtual reality being computed in consciousness. What does that mean? If this is a virtual reality, that means that you are not a human being. You're a piece of consciousness. You're just playing a human being as an avatar. You are a piece of immortal consciousness. You believe that you're a human being because all of your experience, everything you can remember, reflects the experience of your avatar. You are not limited by that. In a virtual reality game, the player and the computer appear to be non-physical from the viewpoint of the virtual reality. So if this is a virtual reality, then we expect the player, your consciousness, and the computer, the consciousness system, to both be non-physical. In this discussion, consciousness is no different than spirit, no different than soul. And the computer that's computing this virtual reality has many names. Sometimes it's called source, sometimes all that is, and sometimes it's called God. But it is not a magical system. It's not done. It's still evolving. It's still in process. And we are pieces of that system, parts of that larger consciousness system, subsets of it. In computer talk, we are a virtual machine inside the mainframe. Just a subset. So yes, those words that we've all heard, we're all one. Those are true. No, we're all pieces of the same consciousness. One other thing, just one more thing about physics that I want to tell you about, is imagine an information system where all the bits are random. There would be no information if all the bits are random. The very if this is a conscious information system, then it can order some of those bits. And if it orders those bits, it creates information. That ordering could be a symbol for something. It could be a letter or a number or anything. Anything that's of value and consequence to the system. So that brings us to the word entropy. Entropy is a measure of disorder. When you order those bits, you're lowering the entropy of the system, creating order where there was once randomness and chaos. That tells us that information systems necessarily evolve, change themselves by lowering their entropy. Now, consciousness is also a social system. There's lots of individuated units of consciousness that is what you are. You are an individuated unit of consciousness. There's lots of us. That makes it a social system. A social system has two ways that it can organize itself. One is the members of that society can cooperate, care for each other. Now we have the evolution of consciousness is toward love. The next thing I want to talk about is about how we're doing on this becoming love thing. Human beings have walking around, Homo sapien has been around for about 200,000 years, and its mission here is to become love. This reality is an entropy reduction trainer for individuated units of consciousness. We're here to make choices. And this virtual reality gives us lots of challenges. And by making choices, we either evolve, if they're choices based on love, or we de-evolve with choices based on fear. So for 200,000 years, we've been trying to learn this lesson of letting go of fear and embracing love. We haven't done very well. We are not graduate students in this schoolhouse. We are maybe preschoolers, maybe elementary school. We have lots of fear. But every century we've gotten a little better, just a little better. The next century a little better yet. For a long time it didn't change much, but if we look back in the last 500 years, you will see that, say 500 years ago, this was a pretty rowdy place. There was very little love. It was a very violent place. You go up a century later, it was a little less violent, and so on, right up to the present time. If you just look back at the last century, there was a lot more fear and violence than there is now. Yes, now we have plenty of fear and violence, no doubt. There's still much of that around, but we still live in a kinder, gentler place than the people of 100 years ago. So we're growing. And that growth is accelerating. It has been like every century, we grow up some. Well, now we're on internet time. Everything goes a lot faster. We've made more progress in the last 50 years than we had made in the last, say, 200 years before that. The pace is quickening. we, humanity, we have an opportunity now to take the biggest step in our spiritual development and our developing ourselves from fear toward love. We have the opportunity to take a big step, not just the little tiny steps we've been taking for the last 200,000 years, but a big step. It's possible. Think of the difference between now and when the Buddha was here 2,500 years ago. He probably climbed up on a big rock, spoke as loud as he could, and maybe 100 people could hear what he was saying. Because if you got at the back of that crowd, you no longer could hear him. Today, we have the internet. If somebody says something really interesting, 4 billion people can hear it 24 hours later. That's a huge change. So we have the capacity now to make big leaps forward. The question is, will we do it? Do we have the will to do it? If we do, then that kind of gentler place that we all would rather live in is maybe only 2 or 3 decades away. We, humanity, are balanced on a knife edge right now. We just about as easily fall off to the side of love or fall off to the side of fear. We're balanced in the middle. It's not clear which way that'll go. But we have the first chance ever in all of human history to take a big step now. And I have noticed over the past 5 years or so that there's been a quickening. There's been a level of interest in spirituality and in growth, in consciousness studies. There's been a swelling of people who feel the need to grow up, better themselves, find out what's really important, get off the treadmill, get onto something more significant. This groundswell has been growing, and it's not circumstantial that it's been growing. The larger consciousness system is engaged in helping us make the right choices, come off of that knife edge to the side of love. It's helping us in many ways. Many of you are here. You've come here, and you traveled long distances to come here because you have this feeling of needing to learn, needing to grow, needing to understand, needing to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. That's what drives you. That's not accidental either. People are being nudged to that cause. People are being awakened to that cause. I see a lot of young people in the audience. I've noticed in the hallways, walking around here, there's lots of young people here. Lots of young people. Many of you have incarnated to this reality frame now because you were picked, handpicked, to be here now. Because the people who are alive now, people who will be born, say, in the next decade, This is a crucial test for humanity. Are we going to choose love or are we going to choose fear? The larger consciousness system is kind of pulling out all the stops and trying to help us. It's helping create this groundswell. It's helping to seed the population with those entities who will have that need to grow up, will have that push, find a better spiritual space, and help their fellows find a better spiritual space. So these are very interesting times. In your lifetime, you're going to be the ones who make that choice. You're going to be the ones who make that decision, whether we fall to the positive of or toward the negative of fear. That's a pretty big responsibility. How did I get in this? How did I get in this position of choice? But here you are. Most of you probably earned it from your past experiences. So how many people do we need? How many people like you, people who are interested in a spiritual evolution, how many of those do we need? Well, I think that probably if we get 10% of the population, that would be plenty. That would be plenty. Because that 10% be succeeding. They'd have smiles on their faces. They would have what they need would be falling in front of them just as they needed. They would be fulfilled. They wouldn't be stressed. The other 90% is going to want to be like that. So 10% is all we need. But 10% of 9 billion people is still an awful lot of people. That's almost a billion people. So we're in the thousands. Actually, we're probably in the hundreds of millions if you went across the world. Not everybody who's into spirituality made it to this event. There are millions and millions of people who are working on a spiritual path who aren't here. We kind of are their representatives here. But we probably have a few 100 million people. Most of the people in this world have looked around and seen the way the world is, the way the world has been. They see the greed, they see the dysfunction, they see the problems, they see the strong taking advantage of the weak, they see intolerance, bigotry. Most everyone, if you ask them, will say, this is not right. We can do better. This is not the best that humans can do. There has to be a better way. Our population, all 9 billion of us, for the most part, think that there has to be a better way. What we're doing isn't working. So the population is ready for change. So finding that 1 billion maybe isn't so hard. We've got almost half of that probably already, just in people like you that are all over the world. But what we need to do is to go mainstream. We need to get into the mainstream of our culture. We've always had smart people. We've always had grown-up people who have understood the nature of reality. The Buddha is a good example. 2,500 years ago, he had it all figured out pretty well. And so did most of the original creators of most of the world's religions. Started with someone who figured it out. Even though there's lots of people, say lots of Buddhists, just to use them as an example, they're still in the margins. They're not in the mainstream. We need to get to the mainstream. There's two ways to get to this mainstream. One of them is we have to get the high priests of our culture tell the people that consciousness is fundamental, that love is the answer. Who are the high priests of our culture? Well, they're the scientists, primarily the physicists. They're the ones that everybody else looks to tell them how reality works, what is reality. And whatever they say is pretty much believed. They can come up with some pretty strange stuff, like dark matter, dark energy. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't notice it, but it's really there, trust me. And people do trust it. So I think that will come along. I think the physicists will join, because this model about consciousness being fundamental, this being virtual reality, it just works better. It delivers more robust, a more general, a more powerful physics. It lets them understand everything they understand now, but then it also lets them solve all the paradoxes that are out there now. Paradoxes in physics, science in general, paradoxes in philosophy, theology, metaphysics, lots of paradoxes. Paradoxes are things that we know are true. We just don't have any idea why they're true. Well, quantum physics has generated a whole set of these paradoxes. Physicists don't understand why is it a fact that at the base of our reality is probability? Why is it that the information that's known or not known changes the result of the experiment? See, those things are easy once you understand the nature of reality. In a virtual reality, that reality exists only in the minds of the players. If you're playing The Sims, there is no place where little Sims characters run around. It doesn't exist. It exists only in the minds of the players. Well, that tells you why we have the observer effect. Why the information that's known or not known changes the experiment. Because if it doesn't get into the mind of a player, it can't get into the reality. That's the only way to get something into the reality is to put it in the mind of a player. And if this is a virtual reality and it's being computed, there is only one rational way to approach it. And that's with probability. Trying to build it from the ground up is a ridiculous idea. You have to start And if this was a virtual reality, it would have pixels. Time would be pixelated, space would be pixelated. And that being the case, as fast as you could go through this virtual reality, would be 1 pixel of space for 1 pixel of time. You could move 1 delta x for every delta t. You couldn't get through the reality contiguously any faster. If you jumped 10 pixels of space for 1 pixel of time, now you're teleported. You're disappearing from one spot and appearing someplace else. That's not the way this reality works. So why is the velocity of light a constant? Because the velocity of light is that delta x divided by that delta t. Physicists call that the Planck length and the Planck time. Those are the pixels. So every virtual reality, including The Sims, has an upper speed limit. Nothing can move faster than 1 pixel distance for 1 pixel time. So you see, those are just a couple examples. These go on and on and on. There's many of these paradoxes that this model supports. It explains. So here we are, humanity. We're balanced on a knife edge. We have to make choices. We have to decide where our future is. We have to understand that we're the ones who can't say, well, future people, my great-great-grandchildren will solve this problem. No, you're going to solve this problem. One way or another, the people that are on this planet now are going to be the ones that make this choice. So how are we going to do that? Many of you came here today because you were nudged, because you have this compulsion to grow up, to get rid of your fear. That's good, part of that groundswell. But many of you also are going to need help. You're going to need a little encouragement. You're going to need some explanations of how things work. Well, that's what big organizations like Unity are trying to do. And yes, it takes big corporate organizations because that's how you get into the mainstream. You can't get into the mainstream talking to audiences of 50 to 100 people. That won't get you to the mainstream. It has to be something bigger than that. So there are classes you can take. There are thousands of teachers, tens of thousands of teachers. Find one that suits you. Skeptical of everything. Particularly be skeptical of yourself. Because we humans are just really, really good at convincing ourselves of whatever it is we want to hear. That's one of our strongest points. Always stay skeptical, particularly of yourself. And realize that if it's not your experience, it can't be your truth. If it's somebody else's experience, it's somebody else's truth, not yours. You can choose to believe it or not believe it, but belief won't help you grow up. Belief won't take you there. Neither will behavior, acting. There is a huge difference between acting kind and being kind. Acting kind is very civilizing, and everybody around you appreciates you acting kindly. Being kind will actually help you evolve the quality of your consciousness. So this is not something to understand intellectually. It's not something you think about and you learn and you read the right books and you go to the right teachers and you learn all the right things to say and how it all works. That's all in your intellect. That is not going to help you grow. You have to change who you are at the being level. You have to be differently. That's what's important.
Thank you so much. These are the books. The German version actually is very good translated because the big theory of everything I have to choose very wisely the words, and I love the German translation. So for everybody who didn't purchase it yet, 100% recommendation. You're here for the meet and greet. And to be very clear, one more question, what's next?
The mainstream is next. We're going That's why we're here. That's why you're here. We're going mainstream together.
Hearing Tom Campbell live was an experience that stays with me. He opens your mind in the most grounded, practical way. If you want to explore his ideas further, check out his book My Big Toe. I really recommend it. It's a journey that might just change how you understand life and reality itself. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.